Kia ora. Thanks for joining us today. New Zealand is a pioneer in ocean protection and innovation. Our emerging seaweed sector is set to be inclusive of stakeholders from a community level all the way through industry, science, and government. I'm joined by esteemed panelists to take a glimpse at Aotearoa's seaweed space as it is today and into the future. On the industry side, we're joined by Hayley from Pacific Harvest. On the research side is Serean from Cawthron Institute. And on the economic side is Nigel from EnviroStrat. Full bios are available in the event portal. We're getting to the bottom of what challenges New Zealand's seaweed industry is facing, taking a quick look at pilot projects like regenerative ocean farming, assessing the political support the industry is receiving, and ultimately what the future of the seaweed is in this Pacific Island nation. Hayley, could you talk us through some of the challenges New Zealand's seaweed industry is facing? And Serean and Nigel, feel free to add in here.
Thanks, Jasmine, and lovely to be with everyone today. So obviously where there's challenge, there's opportunity too. But I think probably to summarise the main challenges we've experienced as a business, it would be, I guess we're at the beginning of a journey, and to try and design a system that I always try to look at the end and then work back to the beginning and design it ideally in a way that we want to make sure that we can keep the seaweeds in good health and the balance in the ocean, but also make sure that we're addressing customer needs at the end of the value chain. So understanding what do we have that's unique and special, how do we go about communicating that to the various different types of customers that might be interested in the seaweeds we have on offer. But I think the whole provenance and transparency story needs to be hardwired into how we design this industry. And it is an opportunity because we're at the beginning, but it's a challenge because we haven't designed it yet. And I think we're still at that stage of trying to get everyone aligned as to what that looks like. I also think from our perspective, we're producing food grade products, so finding harvesters that can produce or harvest seaweed and dry it at a food grade level to get that quality standard that we need, that has been quite challenging for us. And then obviously the regulatory environment, which has some complexity and is multifaceted. There's different levels of it at different stages of the value chain that need addressing. And there's some interesting and important work being done in that area. But in my opinion, it could be just going quite a lot faster than it is. So I think, our regulatory environment is tied into the fishing industry, and that's not fit for purpose. My ideal scenario would be where we could look at it at a species by species level, and also make sure that there's a framework for the country to follow, but there is a bit of regional flexibility based on the conditions that are in those particular regions that might impact the seaweed. So I think what is really apparent to me is that our end consumer really values an honest and a transparent announcement of how we do it, and that is not just we mustn't do that just because it's a nice thing to do, or that it's what New Zealand should be doing. It's actually a really important, and from an environmental perspective, it's actually an important economic requirement that it is part of what we deliver. So getting all of that right, and the complexity of obviously each species being unique, that's a challenge for anyone. But I don't know if Serean or Nigel had anything to add to that.
Yeah, Serean, what's your thoughts, especially on the importance of iwi engagement and community stakeholder engagement?
Sure. So I guess, New Zealand at the moment has supply chains that are pretty fragmented and they're not really developed. And that's at the moment really because we rely on beach cast and wild harvest seaweed. So we're very much, we've got one person that I know of commercially farming seaweed in New Zealand. So we don't have any commercial hatcheries. We've got one commercial farm, so we don't have any workforce development going on, although we could, you know, take learnings and kind of move people across from the existing aquaculture sector. We've got some processing and manufacturing facilities in New Zealand, but again, they're reliant on the wild cast. And these regulatory barriers that Hayley points to are really significant. In terms of iwi involvement and the importance for Māori, you know, New Zealand is a marine biodiversity hotspot. We've got around 1,000 different species of seaweed, and Māori have a really special relationship with the natural world. So Māori whakapapa, or that's like their genealogy, it links them with all living things, and so it's really important that Māori are leading and play an important role in the sector when we commercialise our native species. And some of those species, some of our seaweed species are considered taonga or sacred to Māori, and it's really important too, as we develop this sector, that we respect Māori rights in terms of the treaty. In New Zealand, Māori represent about more than 20% of the existing aquaculture industry, and that's probably going to only grow as the sector grows. So it's really important, I guess, from that perspective as well. And I guess in terms of, you mentioned community engagement, you know, aquaculture and fishing is a regional, it's a regional economic driver. It's regionally important, and so and you know, aquaculture and seaweed is in our public space, and so we need to make sure that we consult with our communities when we develop this, and that communities see a benefit from it. So that might be job creation and wealth, but it can also be that they're seeing the environmental benefits of what we're doing.
Nigel, what are you seeing as the larger problems the New Zealand industry is facing?
So there's two parts to it, I think. One is things that we can control, and one is things we can't. So what we can't control is that we're at the bottom of the earth, and that means we're a long way away from the markets, the export markets. That's tough. What we can control, so seaweed as a sector is really in its infancy in New Zealand. Overall, there have been some companies around for 20 odd years, but as a sector, it's brand new. We can control that, and we are. There's a lot of work going on developing a framework that Serean's leading, so that there's some sort of strategic thinking going on behind that. We can, through that sort of work, thinking strategically, is what are the species that we should be focused on? What does the future supply chain need to look like? Thinking about what Serean was just talking about, thinking about also what Hayley was talking about, what the markets want, and understanding all of these different dynamics strategically can then enable us to overcome the challenge of having a brand new industry. And actually we can learn a lot from other countries that have gone through some challenges that we don't necessarily need to, if we can learn from them. The last thing I'd mention in terms of challenges is climate change. And what we're seeing, as in most parts of the world, with warming waters in particular, is species distribution is changing. So some of the species that we may have found in the north of New Zealand 10 or 20 years ago are moving south at a rate of knots. And that's something that, again, we can't control warming waters, but we can control strategically what the country focuses on in terms of developing that emerging seaweed sector.
Yeah. Serean and Nigel, you co-authored a report suggesting an industry voice was needed in the form of a sector body, which Hayley has taken the ball forward on. Serean, could you touch on why this is crucial? And Hayley, after that, could you talk us through how interested people can also get involved?
Sure. So, Nigel is working with me on a project for Sustainable Seas, which is around developing a framework for what a thriving sector in New Zealand would look like. And one of the recommendations we came through with was having that sector voice. And I guess we see that as really important for having being able to represent the needs across the sector to government, and government being able to go to sort of, rather than interact on a company by company basis, have that clear strategic view with the sector as a whole. And, you know, also it's enabling those sector participants to share where their roadblocks are that they're seeing, and help prioritise those with the government, so that we can help kind of unlock the sector for New Zealand.
Yeah, that sounds
great.
Like it's
grateful to Hayley for taking up the charge.
Sounds really important. Hayley, could you talk us through a little bit more about that, please?
So just to say, I'm not the only one. There are a group of us who have formed an inaugural board and set up the Aotearoa New Zealand Seaweed Association, and I've just shared a link to our website, which is really just launched in the last week, and so we're quite new and still ironing a few little kinks out in it, and just about to start sort of recruiting for members. And we've had quite a lot of work to do to get ready for this. In the background, obviously, very much you'll see from our homepage the values led, which needs to kind of run through this industry, and starting with people who are participating in this association. And it's so my particular interest in this is obviously looking at the entire value chain, but we are hoping to attract participants in it from every sector, whether it be an academic interest, or harvesting or growing seaweeds or exporting them. So early days, we're up and running, and we are also, as part of the membership process, running a little survey just to try and get information from the members about what they think is important and the areas they believe we need to focus on. Obviously we'll be sharing that and using that to inform the work stream of this new group, and funding opportunities as we see what comes out as a priority. And I think that's why it's really important we have a range of participants at different stages of the value chain. So it's not just a harvesting group or a food group. Different applications, different people with different interests need to express their opinions to make sure that we actually have a solid foundation as an industry group. So please jump on the website. I don't know if you can share that link, but it is exciting to have it up and running. And on behalf of all of us, so we're an inaugural board, so we will be having a vote and electing a new board later in the year.
Fantastic. Collaboration, key to success. Nigel, New Zealand has already begun work on regenerative ocean farming. What shape is that taking?
Brand new. So we are developing a project at the moment. Looking, initially it's focused on seaweed, but what we're starting with is the underpinnings from an environmental perspective and from a social perspective. And so thinking about regenerative economies in quite a broad way, and so that whatever we develop from a seaweed farming point of view, or an end-to-end supply chain for seaweed, being underpinned by some really strong principles, and also being able to understand, measure, and talk about the environmental impact and the social impact that we're looking to create. And so we've got a project we've just been underway with as a pilot for almost 12 months now, and we're testing, first of all, really fundamentally, there is, as Serean was saying before, there is no supply chain as such in New Zealand. So building some hatcheries and piloting the farming of a particular native brown seaweed, Clonia, but also while we're piloting that, to understand how to sort of optimize the productivity of farming, we're also measuring the nutrient uptake from seaweed, measuring the CO2 sequestration, so we can understand the positive impacts. We'll also be monitoring biodiversity impacts, and we want to understand negative as well as positive. But also really fundamentally is developing a business model that will enable, after the next couple of years with this pilot, we want to be able to scale up an approach to seaweed farming that is going to stay with those principles that we're developing. And so thinking about how we can ensure that the seaweed farmer of the future is going to be enabled to be successful as much as possible. So that means guaranteeing that they can get access to hatchery product, guaranteeing that they can sell product at a fair price. And so that helps to commercially de-risk the enterprise, providing support structures, so like training, like compliance, helping in an overarching way. Perhaps it's providing some of the really expensive capex that might otherwise be cost prohibitive, vessels or drying or pre-processing, whatever it might be. And so what we're developing at the moment is thinking with the future in mind, is if we want to be able to scale this in the right places, in the right way, and to make sure that the principles that we're establishing now are going to continue to underpin what we're doing, is we're working with local Māori communities and local marine farmers who are interested in seaweed. Everyone's talking about seaweed, everyone's interested, but no one yet in New Zealand has really got that whole kind of supply chain in hand, and understanding what the opportunity is, but also what the risks are, and in a way that will enable it to grow without what you see in many other parts of the primary sector, where you have corporate consolidation and the farmer or the forester or the fisher ends up doing most of the work, taking most of the risk and earning the least money. And that's the sort of thing where really, when we talk about regenerative farming, it's partly, a huge part of it is environmental, but it's also economic and it's also social, so that those future participants can succeed in their own right, but are also being enabled to succeed through the sort of support I've mentioned.
Yeah. And New Zealand is unique in the global market. We offer high-end quality that's environmentally conscious, and we can offer a really diverse range of different seaweed products. Political support is going to be crucial while the seaweed industry is just starting to grow legs. Serean, is there political will to engage?
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. Government has been really engaged in how it can support this sector and what sort of changes need to be made in terms of our regulatory environment to enable it. So, those hurdles that need addressing, like Hayley said, a lot of there's some constraints around farming that have been brought about as a result of the Fisheries Act. And the Fisheries Act has done a really good job of protecting our seaweed resources, but at the same time, it doesn't create an enabling environment at the moment. And there's a bunch of other legislation as well that applies to foods and export. And if we bring in Asparagopsis, for example, with methane and emission, how that gets regulated. So there's, it's right through the value chain that there's some regulatory hurdles that need to be addressed, I guess. Yeah, but the government is very willing to look at those and try to prioritise those so that we can see people at least begin to innovate and try to develop this sector for New Zealand, and that not to be a roadblock.
I'm just backing up what Serean's saying, and I fully agree. The government is really supportive, and there are a number of different agencies involved, but there's a lot of funding going into applied R&D. So the work I was talking about before is partly being funded through a grant from government, but also the recognition from, I think, within government that they don't necessarily know what the answers are that the sector will need, and so they're really open to participants like us, helping them work out what needs to happen to enable a sector to thrive. And so the framework that Serean's leading, the new association that Hayley's talking about, all of those things are going to be massive contributors to enabling the government to be as supportive as it wants to be. And I think that's, there's definitely will there, and really there's a huge opportunity for us that we don't see often in a sort of emerging sector like this.
Mm. And Hayley, as an independent producer, what's your experience been with government as you've been getting set up?
I think, well, to be honest, I spend more time focused on customers, as you would expect in an industry like you're in. As I said earlier, my wish is that it would be moving faster. I do appreciate the complexity and the multifaceted nature of some of the things that we need to resolve. But this is such an amazing industry and so good for the world. And I think New Zealand's got a really important part to play. So I'd probably say I'm a little bit on the impatient side, if I'm honest. But I am confident that we've got the right structure. And I think some of the work that Serean's done through all those research reports covering a number of different topics will give us the right sort of approach. And I think, again, just to say, some of the projects that Nigel's been talking about are, I think, really interesting for New Zealand. And personally, I think that's the direction we should be going in. But I just would like to see a little bit more foot on the gas, let it going a bit faster.
Yeah. And Hayley, I'd love to know, what kind of products are you having more success with, or what kind of products is there more demand for coming from New Zealand for you?
Yeah, so we obviously do a range of seaweed. So we wherever possible, we offer a New Zealand species, but not everything grows in this part of the world. So our customer base is interested in a range. So I'm delighted that we've been able to grow all of the species that we are offering, because I think it's important for people to eat a range of seaweeds, not just like you wouldn't just eat carrots, you'd eat a range. It's the same with sea vegetables. So that's seeing the range grow has been awesome. We're really excited. Last year, 2 of our products were finalists in the New Zealand Food Awards. So that's also brilliant, because it gives people confidence to try something new. And if it's recognised in that sort of environment as a sort of bona fide food product, and not something scary that they're not sure about, that starts to build a little bit of interest. And we'll keep investing in those sorts of products, and increasingly looking to offer a New Zealand equivalent as we can access it at a food grade level.
Yeah. Fantastic. Serean, what areas, in your opinion, is New Zealand leading in the global seaweed space in terms of our development? Is it like community involvement? Is it science? Is it innovative products? Is it agricultural solutions? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's a really tricky question. I do think, it's like we do have these pockets of innovation that are in different places and in different parts of the value chain. So it's a hard question to answer. There's some amazing product development sort of research going on at the moment. I think that's quite exciting and offers quite opportunity for New Zealand, I guess, because, that's where we're kind of looking, as to not necessarily have to compete in a commodity sort of product. We want to be in that high value space. But yeah, there's lots happening across the board for the sector, but it's all kind of in pockets, which is one of the things I think with that sector body, and that we've been trying to bring together with those reports, like what is going on, what should be going on, what should we fund, what should we make sure there's not something going on over here, and then people reinventing the wheel somewhere else. So we're trying to get that coordinated approach across New Zealand, because we're too small to, be reinventing the wheel and not collaborating, really.
Yeah, exactly. We've had an audience question come in, so I'm going to put this up to all of you guys. How likely is it that our government will look at policy coming from Australia or the EU to define local New Zealand policy?
They are, and they will absolutely, and that's partly also the work that we were talking about before developing that framework, is looking at where other parts of the world have had success, whether that be regulatory policy or research strategies, that sort of thing. But I think there's the opportunity we have, one of the big opportunities is to learn from what others have done, either successfully or not so successfully. And where you've got much more experience in other parts of the world, then absolutely we are looking to learn from those experiences.
Yeah. In looking to the future, New Zealand is in a pretty unique position. Nigel, what kind of unique opportunities do we have for the future of New Zealand's seaweed industry?
Unique. We're world leaders in other parts of aquaculture. So the opportunity, I think one of the big opportunities in terms of being ahead of the rest of the world is actually leveraging the experience that we've already got with some of us, similar but different sector. And a lot of the work that, say, Cawthron does on the R&D side of things is really amazing. There's some great work being done out of another university, University of Waikato, that is looking at bioremediation, for example. So land-based systems for bioremediation to clean up water pollution. Those sorts of things are great, and I think probably world class. It's hard to be. We can't be world leading in everything. So climate responses, climate change mitigation is one area that I think will be a really big opportunity. We have an opportunity, I think, here to link the blue to green, so the agri sector that needs to decarbonise, and some of the seaweed related solutions that are emerging that people talk about a lot, asparagus being one of them. They for me are an area where we should be really ahead of many other countries, because we can we're small and nimble, and we've got really strong R&D, and being able to reduce the climate impact and other impacts of the agri sector through the use of seaweed, I think is a really great opportunity for us that others will look to for some lessons.
Yeah. And Serean, how does New Zealand's seaweed future look to you?
I guess I hope that, in the future, we've got this really thriving sector that is creating quite a wealth for New Zealand, but it's also delivering those social and cultural and environmental outcomes. So it's delivering that regional economic growth and those skilled jobs in our communities. And I wouldn't put my hand on my heart and say one species or one product at the moment is going to be the industry. I think it would be really good to see a whole heap of players and a whole heap of products come out of this industry that help, reduce our environmental footprint from the other sort of products that we use that are similar, have similar purpose. I think that would be an amazing outcome for New Zealand.
Yeah. We're just about to open up for some questions. So send in your questions if you've got any burning questions. Hayley, what's your vision for the industry's future? What are your hopes?
I think so I echo some of the sentiments that Nigel and Serean have already highlighted, but I think for us, sort of a tailored regulatory framework that's specific to seaweed and actually serves seaweed and protects the environment first and foremost would be awesome. I think we need a lot of courage, secondly, as an industry to work collaboratively. We need to be looking at a range of species, not just one or two, because we, as Serean's already alluded to, we have an amazing biodiversity, and it would be a shame to just develop along one track. And then I think thirdly, really importantly, in terms of market access and the customer base, export-wise, I think my vision would be to see a highly educated, highly aware customer base out there who is understanding of what we can bring as Aotearoa New Zealand seaweed harvested here in this special place that we have. What does that bring, and how is it unique to seaweeds that they might be able to access from other parts of the world?
Yeah. We've got a question here which carries on from something you touched on earlier, Hayley. What about invasive species? Is there a possibility to contain invasive species? And what about cultivation of some of them?
Well, I could speak about, there's a wonderful story to be told if you're able to harvest an invasive species and turn it into a food rather than harvest it and dump it. That is a nice circular story that we should be moving towards. In terms of the other aspects of it, I'm not a scientist, so I probably defer to those more knowledgeable than me in that area. But I think there's always an opportunity. The invasive species. We have one, obviously. Wakame is a good one to reference, which grows very well down here, but it is problematic. So I would love to harvest it and create it into a food product. We need to see more of that sort of regulatory environment that it enables that sort of activity to happen, and creating jobs and employment through that process rather than just spending taxpayers' money to dive and clear it and dump it. That doesn't really sort of make sense to me, but
yeah, the ultimate solution is to utilize it.
Yeah.
Serean, what's your thoughts on that? Is there any examples of this happening already?
There is people harvesting Underia or Wakame in New Zealand, but making it into fertilizer, and it is kind of a nice, I guess, circular economy story. So that's Waikato. I'm not aware of any other companies, but there may be other companies as well that are making products from it. And that at the moment it turns up as fouling on artificial structures, and it turns up as fouling on our mussel farms, and that's where they're able to source it from. There are, we are a marine biodiversity hotspot, and so in an ideal world, we just want to make sure that we don't inadvertently encourage it spreading through the activities that we use to harvest it and things like that. But I agree that we should make use of it as a resource. There's sometimes an argument for, if you do that, you create a market, then you create a demand, then you go down another pathway through that. But yeah, we are making use of some of that waste, some of that invasive species at the moment with what people are doing in New Zealand.
Yeah. And we've got a question coming from Gina in the United States. I love hearing about the success of Maori farms and businesses. And I love learning about Indigenous seaweed practices. Are Maori voices part of shaping the regulatory framework you've all been discussing? So maybe we could just pick up on that earlier discussion. Serean, maybe you could just cover that again.
Yeah, so we see it's really important for Māori to have a leader, to be at the table, or to play a leading role in the sector. The challenges that they need to want to be as well, in terms of that they need to have time and capacity to participate in this sector, I guess, or to be resourced to participate in this sector. But the government, through, as I said, Māori have rights under the treaty, and government need to work with Māori to come up with ways to enable them to be leaders in this space. So I'm not sure if I'm fully answering that, but it is a really important piece. They will be absolutely part of the discussion, and part of framing up what it would look like going forward would be my thoughts.
Yeah, and that iwi participation and stakeholder involvement, is really crucial, especially at this early stage. We've got another question regarding the value chain. Is it likely that investors will bring adequate funding to develop a clever seaweed industry? Nigel, I think that one's for you.
Thank you. Yes, there is already, I mentioned before, government investment, and there's significant investment coming in from the public sector. But I think the there is increasing interest. We're a really easy part of the world for investors in terms of it's easy place to do business. There's a lack of corruption, stable government, all of those sorts of things make it really attractive to investors. What we need to be able to develop is the proposition to attract that investment, and that's the sort of thing like having a strategic framework in place, and having a really clear plan of what you would do and what you wouldn't do with investment is important. But there is a huge amount, as I think we all know, a huge amount of interest from the investment community broadly, globally. And the problem for a lot of investors is actually finding projects that are of decent scale, that are replicable, that align with their particular values or what it is that they're looking to achieve with that. But absolutely, I think there's going to be no shortage of capital. We just need to have a supply chain that exists. We need to make sure that we understand from a regulatory point of view all of those things we've talked about earlier. Once we've got these things in place, we become even more attractive, I think, to investment.
Serean, I think you might be best for the next question. Is bromoform production one avenue for product? And how big would the farms need to be to support the New Zealand dairy industry? Are you familiar with bromoform?
Bromoform, yeah. So bromoform is the active ingredient in Asparagopsis. It can be produced synthetically. And so I guess there is an opportunity to use synthetic bromoform over Asparagopsis. I'm aware that there was some studies years ago about bromoform, but I couldn't sit there and tell you how effective it is relative to the quantities and things that are in Asparagopsis. People see Asparagopsis as a much more sort of palatable route to a synthetic chemical in terms of as a feed supplement to livestock. So that's part of the kind of selling proposition of going down the pathway of growing Asparagopsis for methane reduction. Oh, there you go. Someone said bromoform is not well tolerated by livestock in isolation, whereas the study so far with Asparagopsis, when it's at low dose, it's at relatively low doses that it can be quite effective. And yeah, there you go. Seaweed does a great job. Yeah, and Asparagopsis also contains a number of other halogenated compounds that are also effective as methane inhibitors. So it's not just the bromoform itself, but there's a bunch of other actives in there as well.
Yeah, and I guess we have to keep in mind when we're talking about methane reduction in terms of how far has the product travelled from the farm to the cows. If the purpose is to counter climate change, there's a lot of factors to consider, and I guess a lot of studies still to be done in that space.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies still to be done, I think, to really see it usable in a commercial setting and at commercial scale. But there's a real keenness to go there because we all see climate change as a really pressing issue. And to my knowledge, the other products and things that have come out so far for methane inhibition haven't been as effective as what Asparagopsis has been found to be. But there's a lot of sort of long-term studies and food safety and things like that you would need to look at before it's fully kind of implemented and out there as a solution. And it's also not to say it'll be the only solution, I guess. Yeah.
And so we've got time for one or two last questions. How could we foster consumer awareness, as this will be the main driver for acceptance and really creating an impact? Hayley, what's your thoughts on this?
Sorry, I was distracted by reading the question. Could you repeat I couldn't see the question on here.
How can we foster consumer awareness, as this will be the main driver for acceptance and driving impact?
Yeah, so obviously in Asian cultures, seaweeds are already very well accepted and understood in many aspects, certainly compared to the Western markets. So I think most of the education, from what I can see, from a food perspective, needs to be in the Western markets. That's definitely growing, and I think it is fostered by more people getting involved in the industry, more people talking about it, more people understanding it, more evidence of the benefits that seaweed has for health and for our planet. I don't think there's ever been a time where people have been more interested in immunity, thanks to COVID. And, we've definitely seen a growing interest in certain species that are traditionally linked with respiratory resolution, helping people who are having respiratory issues. So the world will keep moving, and seaweeds, I believe, will always have something to offer. They're not a new thing. They've been around for millennia, and, will be hopefully for many more. It's just about education and more people bringing the energy to the industry so that we debunk some of the myths. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been told by someone they eat seaweed when they've only ever eaten, sushi, for example. But we have 10 species in our range, and each one is unique from a flavor perspective, from a nutrient perspective. And this is just about us, walking the talk and getting out there and talking to customers, both at a trade and consumer level.
Yeah. We've got a last question here coming in from the Pacific island of Tahiti. How could we collaborate in order to build and develop a robust regional industry that benefits Pacific Island populations? Nigel, I think that would be for you.
Knew you were going to say that. Well, it's linked into the question that just came up in the chat as well about Australia and learning from Australia. But what I was saying before about the opportunities to learn from not just what others have done well or not so well, but equally where we're all emerging, like Tahiti in this example, and Australia's emerging. I think there is the more collaboration. This sort of event is awesome, but having people who are willing to put their hands up and arrange for either virtual or real life face-to-face getting together to talk about the shared challenges, the shared successes, the work that the framework development that we were talking about before is intended to provide a strategic vision for a seaweed sector. That's some of the initial momentum for that came from seeing that the Australian seaweed framework had been developed a year and a half ago, a couple of years ago, whenever that was. And so that's another example. I think we're building on, and going back to the question, some of the Pacific island countries that are really interested in this stuff can benefit from the learning that we're going through here, that the Australians have been through, etc., and recognise we're all in this relatively new phase of something that has a lot of interest and attention, and we can share the learnings. I'd love to go to Tahiti.
Just waiting for the invite.
Yeah, same.
Thanks so much, panelists. Thanks so much, viewers, everyone for watching. Thanks for joining us, and good luck on everyone's seaweed journey. Feel free to contact me if you'd like to learn more about the Super Seaweed movie that'll be coming out next year. Fantastic. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.